Does the following description of a relationship resonate with you? I used to be really happy, spunky, full of life and passion. I may not have been perfect, but I was a reasonably healthy person mentally. I had good friends, I was always doing things that I loved, and I was a positive and happy person. Now, I don't even know who I am. I can't concentrate on work. I no longer have any close friends. The narcissist in my life has treated me horribly, but I just can't leave. I can't let go of what I know that she or he could be. When we first met, they were everything I ever wanted in a person. Now I'm lucky to get a crumb of love tossed my way, and yet I can't let go of the hope that that incredible version of them that I saw in the beginning won't come back. I'm so scared that if I leave, let go, and move on, that I'm going to be making the biggest mistake of my life and that I'll never find anyone that could love me the way they did at the beginning. If that resonates with you, you're in the right place. You're going to want to watch this video, okay? We're going to talk about the difference between love and trauma bonds and how to be able to tell if you're in love or in bond. You probably heard about the phrase trauma bond. You've probably done some research, but you're here, so that means you still need a little bit more information. So I'm hoping this video will help. Anyone that has ever been in a trauma bond always confuses trauma bonds with love at one moment or another, okay? And it's understandable because the chemistry that you feel in a trauma bond is so intense that if you compare it to the chemistry you've had in other relationships where you didn't have that trauma bond, those relationships can almost seem boring. So I want to explain why that is. Why is it that those relationships where we feel the most chemistry with a person, that are the most intense, off the charts, why they are normally with somebody that's toxic, okay? I love the way Ross Rosenberg explains what it's like to be in a relationship with a codependent and a narcissist. So normally in a healthy relationship is made up of two healthy individuals. 1 + 1 is 2, right? So you have two people in a relationship. Anyone that's been through kindergarten knows that. So the difference is that the narcissist does not really equal one whole person. They're like half of a person. So you have that half of a person, and guess what? You can say the same thing about someone that is a codependent. So rather than having one healthy individual plus one healthy individual coming together in a relationship, you have one half of a person with the other half with this gravitational pull, because what's missing in one is found in the other. So there's that pull, and the intensity comes from fusing two halves to make one whole person. In essence, what is broken in one individual aligns up with what is broken in the other, and they fuse together. What happens after that is a relationship that is pretty much like a roller coaster ride. Something with extreme highs and extreme lows. In the beginning, you're love bombed and put so high up on a pedestal that you feel like you found somebody that finally gets you. This is everything you could have ever hoped for in a relationship, and this is everything you would have ever wanted from another person. Then when you least expect it, you're suddenly flung off of that pedestal. You're criticized. Now you're being devalued, you're being ignored, you're being insulted, and it's usually for things that make no sense. And this is where the extreme emotions start coming in. So when you're on the narcissist's good side and you're up on that pedestal, you feel amazing. You know, the highs couldn't get higher. Unfortunately, the lows couldn't get lower either. And that's when the abuse cycle really kicks in. So you find yourself chasing after the original highs that you were given in the beginning of the relationship. You're doing everything you can to get there, right? And no matter how hard you try, it's almost like what you're chasing and searching for is running the other way. And then the second you stop chasing it because you just can't take it anymore, the narcissist tosses you a crumb of love. And you get that rush of positive hormones in your brain. You think this is amazing and you're hooked back into craving and hoping that this time things will be different all over again. And that's what creates a trauma bond. It's that cycle of punishments, rewards, lows, and then highs over and over again that winds up bonding you to this person through all of those intense emotions. And that bond is like crazy glue to your souls. It's almost like you are fused together, unable to separate. And the target of narcissistic abuse, or the target of the narcissist, I should say, sadly interprets those intense emotions as love. What makes it harder for some to not see that this isn't love is the fact that a lot of people that wind up in relationships with narcissists often came from parents or caregivers that had those same dynamics. And if you experienced abuse from a caregiver that loved you, then it's easy to interpret abuse for love. So this became the template for how you learned how to relate to others, how you learned how to be or what to expect from relationships. So at this point, if you're wondering, okay, I get it, maybe I'm in a trauma bond, but I'm still not sure. I'm going to give you some questions to really meditate and analyze if you really want to know the truth. Do you tend to justify the abuse by saying things like, oh, she or he didn't mean to hurt me, or he's not as bad as other people I've been in relationships with, or he wants to change? And again, I say he a lot, but I fully recognize that oftentimes relationships are with a female narcissist as well. So I just want to make that note. If you were to list the positives and negatives of the relationship, with the negatives totally outweighing the positives, do you still feel like you can't leave? You can easily see that the relationship is bad for you and yet still have this sense that you can't leave. That's a sign of trauma bonding. If you were to write down all of the ways your partner emotionally fulfills you, builds you up, supports you, and brings out the best in you, would you be able to fill half of a page? Or when you actually look at what they give to the relationship, is it simply mere crumbs of love? Have you become addicted to the hormonal and emotional roller coaster that your abuser has put on you? Okay, when you listen to that question, somebody might say, how could somebody become addicted to that? Or who would want something like that? That makes no sense. But think about it. What happens when you're being abused, right? You're stressed, you're feeling down, you're getting depressed during the moments that the abuser is being absolutely toxic. It's a horrible, horrible feeling. So when they suddenly toss you a crumb of love and now you're on the upscale of the abuse cycle and you're getting that rush of dopamine and that rush of hormones that feel good, what our brain does is it then focuses on that moment where you got that crumb and it highlights it, it makes it huge in your mind, and it deletes or puts to the side all the other negatives so that your focus is only on that crumb. To quote from Katie Morton, a licensed therapist, she says, the rush of stress hormone cortisol and a flood of the feel-good chemical dopamine can trigger the reward center in our brain, which can cause you to think you're in love with your abuser. So not only is your reward center of your brain being activated, but it's also eliminating the reality of what is also going on by putting the things that are hurting you in, it's compartmentalizing the things that are hurting you and putting them aside for you to not look at. In my face-to-face coaching, I see that a lot. When I'm working with people that are in a trauma bond, oftentimes while they're still in the relationship, they're trying to understand what's going on. So one week they're looking at the abuse and they're thinking it's awful. And then the next week they're thinking, oh, it's not that bad. So something that I have them do is I have them keep track of all of the positives and all of the negatives that happen in between our sessions, right? So they keep track of both, not just the negatives and not just the positives. I remember one client that was going through this. She told me, she's like, Michele, because I wrote it down, and it was her first time doing the exercise, she goes, because I wrote it down and I'm looking at it in front of me, I cannot believe the amount of negative things that happened in such a short span of time. She said, and I think this is normal, like this happens all the time, but why? It's like my mind forgets. If I didn't write it down, I would forget. And she was absolutely right. While you're in that abuse cycle and while you're in that trauma bond, your brain is deleting the negative and focusing on the positive, which sadly makes you think that it's love because there's so much intense emotions, but also it keeps you stuck in a relationship that is ultimately destroying you. Another major sign of a trauma bond is if rather than living as yourself, right, and just being you in the relationship, your mind is always going as to what can I say to make sure this person is happy? What if they get mad? I want to make sure that I don't do anything that upsets him or her. In other words, you're walking on eggshells. You're not even able to feel comfortable in your own skin being yourself. You're so attached to this person that you feel like you can't get your needs met anywhere else. You're validated by your partner's approval, and without it, you feel like you'll fail. Therefore, your whole existence is about striving after their approval, even though you never get it. Or, for the moments that you do, it's only temporary before they take it back and you're back at square one. If any of this sounds familiar, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it is not love. A relationship like that is not love. It is bond. It is a trauma bond. Truth hurts, but again, if this resonates with you, you're in a trauma bond with a toxic person. And sadly, people can stay in that cycle hoping for that original relationship, the way it started out, hoping for that to come about. I've seen people in that cycle for years and even decades.